Okay, guys, so this article that I'm reading should have been done with the Catholic priest abuse article, but this is also in the spirit of defending LGBTQ rights, uh, in terms of the trans genocide, I guess, along with drag queens being called groomers and whatnot. Alright, so I didn't follow this trend because I don't follow trends. Uh, At least not online ones, I guess, not as much. Why is the not a drag queen trending right now? Alright. As the attack on queer people, trans people, and drag performances heats up, it only manages to become more ridiculous. The right is claiming that drag shows constitutes child abuse, and Tennessee recently passed the first bill to ban drag performances, which means that, like in the old anti-trans bathroom bills of 2015, it becomes our job to point out that it isn't drag that's hurting children, it's the religious right itself. True. Alright. Oh, yes. Face cam, by the way. It's a little weird. if you, but I managed to figure this out, I guess. If you see the phrase "not a drag queen" trending on Twitter today, it's a rebuttal to the right's claim that drag, and by extension trans identity, are somehow not child safe by pointing out the real harms that exist within the religious right. In the character of youth pastors and church officials who are actual documented PDF files. Sorry, just doing that for copyright because I don't want to get my channel taken down. Um, I won't censorship all the way through this, obviously. But attend this thread with caution. Each example comes with a pretty harrowing backstory. For example, uh, this youth pastor who abused children in his congregation for 25 years. This person says, can confirm not a drag queen, just another youth pastor. A Virginia youth pastor has been sentenced to 240 years in prison for 14 different counts of child sex crimes. That's actually surprising. The abuse began in 1995 and continued for about 26 years. Meet PDF file, Pastor Terry Compton. Alright. Not a drag queen, not a trans person, not a gay man or politician arrested on child charges. Former GOP candidate and QAnon conspiracy theorist Ben Gibson claimed Donald Trump is working to take down a satanic cult of pedophiles. He was just arrested in Louisiana on 4 charges of child porn. Not a gay man, not a trans person, a politician. Alright. Not a drag queen, not a gay man, not a trans person, not a librarian, not an, okay. Former Oklahoma state senator sentenced to 15 years on child sex trafficking charges. Ralph Shorty was arrested in March 2017 after police found him in a suburban Oklahoma City motel room with a 17-year-old boy. Alrighty then. Definitely the groomers. Okay, this person trying to reach out to Greg Abbott as if they care. Okay. You get the picture. The fact is that the country of drag queens and blah 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 is less harmful than a youth pastor for your yeah. Jeez, that's true enough. This yes, that whole like paragraph. All right. Moving on, guys. That was disturbing, but not as much as the shuffling. Not that whole video was really messed up. All right, this video is just recovering something that we all know, and this is history. Like, um, in terms of our democracy literally being dented. If we even live in a democracy do you even think we do? Not saying it's a republic, but because I've heard arguments that say that's pretty problematic, and e- even if there's a cold logic to a thing, I don't really want to prop up that agenda. Anyways, how a 10-year-old rape victim who traveled for an abortion became part of a political firestorm. Um, and yeah, they don't care. The case of a 10-year-old girl who had to travel from her home in Ohio in Indiana to receive an abortion after being R-worded has become national news and a major political issue following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The child, then nearly 6.5 weeks pregnant, could not legally receive an abortion in Ohio due to the state's fetal heartbeat law, which went into effect after the court abolished the constitutional right to an abortion. Her doctor phoned Indianapolis physician Caitlin Bernard, who agreed to perform the procedure. Bernard went public with the story in the Indianapolis Star. The response from both sides, both sides, okay, um, of the abortion debate had been uncompromising. For advocates of abortion rights, including President Biden, the girl was an example of new abortion restrictions were already harming the most vulnerable people. But sorry, drinking. But abortion opponents have doubled down. Jim Bob, an Indian lawyer and general counsel for the National Right to Life, believes the girl should have carried the child to term. I wanted to talk about this guy actually, but I could never find an article specifically where he was quoted and whatnot. Alright. Quote, she would have had the baby, and as many women who have had baby as the result of rape, we would hope that she would understand the reason and ultimately benefit of having the child. End quote. Bob told Politico on Thursday. Alrighty. Quote, we don't think, as heart-wrenching as those circumstances are, we don't think we should devalue the life of the baby because of the sins of the father. Alright. You're just having empathy for the father at this point? Alright. Well, we know that even if this is their real motives, that these people are just being used for the background engineering overall. Like, they just want workers. They don't give a shit what happens to the children. Alright, here's what to know about the case. What do we know about the case? The Columbus Police Department was informed about the child's pregnancy on June 22nd after the Franklin County's Child Service Agency filed a complaint, NPR noted. Officers have since already arrested Gerson Fuentes, 27, who confessed to raping the girl at least twice. He is currently held at the Franklin County Jail on a $20 million bond. Detectives investigating the case collected Fuentes' DNA to confirm his paternity, and he faces a potential life sentence if found guilty. Obviously should. Although, I mean, if there's still evidence there. Why did it become national news? Oh, and even if the police did have the evidence, they'll just wait until it's unusable, so it's almost pointless. Why did it become national news? I'm not saying we can't try. The case was brought to national attention after Biden delivered impassionate remarks while signing an executive order to protect access to abortion in response to the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade on July 8th. Biden called the Supreme Court's decision extreme since Roe has been overturned. 4 states have banned abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest, unless the mother's life is at risk. Quote, this isn't some imagined horror, Biden said. It's already happening. Just last week, it was reported that a 10-year-old girl was an R-worded victim and was forced to have to travel outside the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the pregnancy. End quote. Biden's executive order asks federal agencies to find policies that would allow FDA approval medications for abortion to remain accessible. It is also sought to protect patient privacy for those seeking reproductive medical services. Uh, Many conservative lawmakers and media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, reacted to Biden's speech by casting doubt that the 10-year-old girl's case even existed. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost on Fox News stated there was not a whisper anywhere of the 10-year-old rape victim. In other words, he's like basically saying that like since there wasn't like viral evidence online and it wasn't everywhere that it must not be true. Which I bet this dude he would say the same thing to a child like, "Oh, so you believe everything that's online? That's ridiculous." So this this is insane. That charged after Columbus police announced the arrest of a suspect in the case. How are officials reacting? Indiana's current law allows for an abortion up to 22 weeks of pregnancy, but that is likely to change following the state's special legislative session on July 25th. Both chambers of the General Assembly have conservative supermajorities, and Republican leaders have promised to increase abortion restrictions, while Republican Governor Eric Malcolm called the 10-year-old case a horrific example. He did not specify the types of restrictions residents can expect. Dr. Mira Shan, medical director of Whole Woman's Health Alliance in South Bend, Indiana, expects abortion to be outlawed entirely in the Hoosier state and says that even exceptions like rape or incest do not protect victims. These laws require that quote, these laws require that patients disclose or have some recognition of what they've experienced on a very specific timeline in order to get the care, Shah says, and goes on to say that requires a patient to disclose that they were raped or experienced incest, and for those of us who that have worked with survivors of trauma, survivors of sexual abuse, we know that oftentimes that trauma gets internalized and is wrapped up with shame and guilt and stigma. Otherwise, in other words, they probably don't come out with it, and like maybe a mental block, and there's lots of things that just you start to make it like your issue. Which again, like people who keep saying like it's not your fault, it's not your fault. Like I feel like that is pretty annoying in my opinion. Um, but there's never a good way to talk to somebody about it. You know, this is why there's specialists, I guess. So, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita announced on Fox News on July 13th that he was launching an investigation to determine whether Bernard filed a report within 3 days of the procedure, as is required by state laws for abortions done on patients under the age of 16. The next day, however, the Star required documents from the Indiana Department of Health showing she did not file the proper paperwork. Uh, Bob, the anti-abortionist rights lawyer, has been involved in writing model anti-abortion legislation to be used by state lawmakers. His medical his metal legislation would have his model legislation would have prevented the victim from obtaining an abortion. What does this mean for other rape victim survivors? Oof. I don't know how many times I've been saying it and not censoring myself. Whoops. Across the United States, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) indicates that nearly 3 million women have experienced R-worded related pregnancy in their lifetimes, with an estimated 1 in 9 girls under the age of 18 experience an R-word, according to the R-word Abuse and Incest National Network. Um, so it's interesting the CDC is keeping track of pregnant women, but I hope that it's more or less the context of rape and incest being like a disease or a type of illness that the CDC would get involved in, I guess. That's interesting and symbolic. Okay. And while data about rape related pregnancy is limited, a 2020 CDC report found that more than 1,700 infants were born to children aged 10 to 14. The statistics are a cause of great concern, experts say, Research by the Commonwealth Fund shows that while maternal deaths are largely preventable, there are approximately 17 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births in America, compared to the 8.6 maternal deaths seen in neighboring Canada. Pregnancy for most adult women can kill them, says Michelle Goodwin, author of Policing the Womb, Invisible Woman and the Criminalization of Motherhood. Quote, if we think of this as a child whose organs become far more vulnerable, whose body has not developed to be able to handle 9 months of this kind of pressure, then one can only see it as being cruel to enforce these kind of mandates. Uh, yeah, it's like eugenics, but not in the colloquial sense of, you know, usually we think of having children as the opposite and eugenics as killing, but uh, any forced medical procedure and ruining someone's life would, un, unless it was a mistake, obviously, like medical malpractice does happen, and that's not eugenics, and uh, but it would definitely be in this case, it definitely would be like you are knowingly putting this person through this, uh, and it wasn't a mistake. All right, uh, since May 9th, there have been 50 police reports of rape and sexual abuse of girls aged 15 or younger in Columbus, Ohio alone. Though experts say confidentiality laws mean some reports may not be included in that figure. Experts also point out that most sexual assaults go unreported. The Ohio Department of Health has indicated that there were 52 abortions that took place in children aged 15 or younger in 2020, down from 63 that were recorded in 2019. And abortion rates for teens are higher than adults, with an estimated 28% of pregnancies for people aged 15 and 17 ending in an abortion. The restrict new abortion laws, that Goodwin says, will disproportionately affect the socially economically vulnerable, and especially low-income women of color that live in states like Alabama with one of the most restrictive abortion policies and highest teen birth rates. And this is just what they want, obviously. Um, well, they expect the black woman to at least not be able to live, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they expect their communities to not be able to like handle it, which is crap. I'm sure there's families and communities that get together to help. Um, uh, there's lots of ways that they think these people can't handle themselves, like in terms of letting the demographic you want dying off, um, which people are very resourceful, obviously. All right. Experts predict teen birth rates will begin to rise. Goodwin likens the young girls who will be forced to travel to receive abortions to refugees. Quote, refugees are individuals who have very legitimate claim to try to save their lives from the tyranny that is being imposed by the government in another state where they will be harmed.